I often see families, parents specifically, just they're not aware of their stress. They're not aware of what they need.
We have a certain way we interact. We have a certain song we hear and a dance that we do with each other. And so we have to shift that if we want things to change. Because if I don't take care of me, I can't continue to give. And so I think that that's obviously something we can all do, costs us nothing, maybe takes 5-10 minutes. So if you feel like something's happening, you don't understand why, you're like, I don't know why I was like this, or I acted in this way, or why I was so agitated. Ask yourself. I know it sounds a little crazy, but you'd like, I'm always surprised at what I actually know. I just don't take the time to follow it or to consider it.
I love that you do that. That's amazing.
Welcome back to another episode of the Unspoken Words podcast, hosted by Dr. Elisa Shippon-Blum and the Smart Center. I'm Brandon, Unspoken Words podcast producer. This episode features a discussion between Dr. E and Kati Morton, a licensed marriage and family therapist, author, and media personality, on how parents and caregivers can better manage the stress often associated with raising an individual with SM. Kati Morton is a licensed marriage and family therapist, best-selling author, and a highly sought-after speaker in the field of mental health. With a master's in clinical psychology from Pepperdine University, Kati has delivered impactful talks at prestigious events and platforms worldwide. Kati has been at the forefront of the mental health movement since 2011, sharing powerful videos that demystify mental health and replace stigmas with understanding. Her influential YouTube channel, with over 1.4 million subscribers and 130 million views, has made her a prominent figure in translating complex mental health concepts into accessible language. An accomplished author of 2 best-selling books, Are You Okay? A Guide to Caring for Your Mental Health, and Traumatized, Identify, Understand, and Cope with PTSD and Emotional Stress, Kati's dedication to dismantling barriers to mental health services and fostering a supportive global community is simply unmatched. In this particular episode, Dr. E and Kati discuss parent and caregiver stress, the importance of self-care for parents and caregivers, why modeling healthy behaviors to your children is so important, and much more. Before we get started, remember, if you have any questions on anything you hear in today's episode, head to selectivemutismcenter.org/ask Dr. E, that's ASKDRE, and enter your question. We read all of your submissions and do our best to answer them on podcast episodes, blog posts, and on social media. And speaking of social media, for the best of this episode and every episode of Unspoken Words, make sure to follow the podcast on Instagram and on YouTube. On Instagram, we are at @unspokenwords_podcast, and on YouTube, we are Unspoken Words Podcast by Dr. E. All right, without further ado, please enjoy the latest episode of the Unspoken Words podcast.
Hey listeners, before we get started, I want to tell you about CommuniCamp, our 3+ day intensive group treatment and all-day parent education and support program designed to help parents, children, and teens overcome selective mutism, social anxiety, and extreme shyness. It's over 16 hours of parent education and support, as well as 16+ hours of treatment for your child or teen. Spaces are limited and spots book fast. To learn more, please find CommuniCamp in this episode's description or head to communicamp.org and complete our interest form, and our team will be in touch. Let's help your child or teen find their voice. Okay, now enjoy the episode. Hi, Kati. Good morning.
Hi, Dr. E. Good morning. How are you?
I am great. I welcome our listeners, and I start off almost every podcast saying, I'm so excited to be here, but I really am so excited to be here. I love this topic that we're going to talk about, and I love your work. Kati Morton, you have the most amazing YouTube channel at Kati Morton. Amazing recommendations for mental health. I have such respect for what you say and how you say it. And I love your book, Are You Okay? Such a down-to-earth, easy to understand book for people to read, and really, it validates them. All of your work validates, your listeners and your readers and followers. Is that pretty much your intent with your work?
Yeah, I feel like as a therapist, it kind of is like the root of what we do, is because I know our internal dialogue can be so invalidating and minimizing. It's nice to sometimes hear from someone that it's okay to feel that way, that it's normal, nothing's wrong with you, all that stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that down to earth approach that you have, and That's why I was so excited that you're joining us today. And selective mutism being a social communication anxiety disorder and being incredibly misunderstood in the world, in the population of even clinicians. One of the things we experience, which is what I wanted to talk to you today about, is the stress that caregivers experience. This isn't an easy 1, 2, 3 type of thing, especially because it's so misunderstood. So I thought today we would talk about caregiver stress.
Exciting topics, Jazz. But yes, important.
Yes, for sure. So in your experience, I mean, dealing with so many like people that reach out to you, I'm sure on a regular basis, you must experience this all the time.
I'm not the best. I always like to say I know better. It doesn't mean I do better personally, but I definitely think that burnout as a whole is something that only recently we've started really talking about and seeking to understand. And I think for everybody to understand what we mean when we talk about burnout, and we can get into stress and stuff as well, but burnout itself happens when the reward, and reward isn't just money, it could be fulfillment, it could be, knowing someone's okay, right? If you're taking care of your child or someone else you love, knowing that they're taken care of is the reward. But the reward needs to be at least commensurate, if not greater than the effort. And that's not always possible, right? Life is tricky. I mean, especially now, everything's more expensive and we make the same amount of money. So that can make the reward, ooh, now it shifts. Or if we're taking care of someone, when we're talking specifically about caregiving, their needs can increase and decrease, so the effort's changing, the reward will stay the same. So I think it's really important for us all, myself included, you also, Dr. E, is to have some regular routines around self-care. And I know self-care people talk about like it's face masks and vacations and massages. Self-care costs you nothing. I get up 5 minutes early, so it's 5 minutes of silence. And I get to wake up a little at a time, or I take a longer shower, or I make myself a yummy meal. There's a lot of ways we can put ourselves first without feeling like we're neglecting those that we're caring for.
No, I love how you're explaining this. It's so real and so important. And I think that what I experience are families traveling, many travel from all across the world to see us for our expertise. And they're burnout already. You could see it in their flat affect. You could see it in just how they hold themselves, self-care, just even how they dress sometimes they're just exhausted. You could see it. And a lot of this is a result of their frustration because they haven't been able to help their child. They haven't received the right help. So that on top of just dealing with a child or a teen or even an adult with a social communication anxiety or a disability that they feel helpless about. And so it's amazing to watch that metamorphosis as they do go through treatment and they start to understand what is really happening with their child, teen, or adult that they're working with. And you see the change in them just from that. However, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the self-awareness to needing self-care. I love your routines. And, for me, it's walking. I break up my day with going for a walk and taking deep breaths as I walk, or listening to my music or an audiobook. That's a big form of self-care for me, and socializing. So I have that awareness. I'm feeling a certain way. What I find, and probably you've experienced, is because they're so entrenched in this disability and the lack of understanding and not knowing what to do and how to do it. I often see families, parents specifically, just they're not aware of their stress. They're not aware of what they need. So how do you talk to your listeners and your followers and, clients in the past of how do you deal with this?
And that's a good point too, because they're so disconnected, right? If all our focus is on someone else, then we often don't pick up on how we're doing. Um, yeah, I mean, to be truthful, that's where a kind of a different type of routine could really be beneficial. And it doesn't have to cost you anything, doesn't have to take much time, but it's essentially like in the middle of the day, at the end of the day, pick up when you have like 5, 10 minutes, maybe when this person usually showers, or that they have another appointment. Can we do a check-in? I always tell people, so often we're disconnected like head from body, where it's like, oh, I have all these stress thoughts. Oh, I have all this stuff that I know I should be doing and whatever, right? And then my body can feel some kind of way. Like I might be fighting a cold. I might be sore. I might be tired. I might, not be able to take care of my hygiene. I just feel overwhelmed by everything. So there's this disconnect between ourselves often. And if we can take just a minute to check in. I do a lot of DBT or dialectical behavior therapy with my patients. And one of the tools in it is called like this white light. Now it can sound woo-woo, you can hate it, that's fine. It's essentially a check-in, imagining a little circular light going down through your body, and just take a beat to be like, how does my head feel? Do I have a headache? Is my ponytail too tight? When did I last wash my hair? Okay. How's my face? How am I feeling? Are my teeth, did I brush my teeth today? It sounds so silly and so simple, but just having that check-in and that idea that you check on the things that are in that light as you imagine it moving through your body. How are you doing? And so I think that that's obviously something we can all do, costs us nothing, maybe takes 5-10 minutes. But then there's a greater piece that I truly believe anyone who's caring for someone else, and I'm throwing mothers, fathers into that, should have a therapist, should have their own therapy. I know it's not always cost effective. I know it can be hard to find someone that's the right fit, but there are things like Talkspace, BetterHelp. There's some other ways to get connected, maybe group therapy. I always encourage, if it's available, like if you find someone wonderful like Dr. E, it's great to know that they have like a group. Maybe, I don't know if you guys run family groups, but it can be really empowering and really validating to hear from other people that you're not alone. That's like, why Al-Anon is so effective for those family members of alcoholics, right? You go and you hear from other people going through the same kind of thing. And I think that can be a great space, a great thing to invest time in. And obviously, I know it can cost more money, but that could be self-care as well. I mean, I could go on and on. There's so many
No,
things.
I think this is great. I mean, I love the check-in. I love it. That feeling. Sometimes I do something similar with families. I'll say, I kind of think of it as clouds. You have the really bright, sunny clouds. You have the darker clouds. Like when you have a feeling, check into that feeling. What is your body feeling? What are you feeling? What cloud is over you? And it's temporary. It's going to move. And coming up with a list of what helps you like feel like if you're feeling down. A big thing for our families, our caregivers, is just they feel depressed and they feel helpless. So what can you do to change that? What do you enjoy? And having a list of these go-tos, so that when I'm feeling a certain way, calling a friend, listening to music, doing some meditation, like you were saying, what is like almost the opposite of that feeling? Putting on music and dancing in the bathroom as you're getting dressed in the morning, or I mean, there's just so many things, but that like self-awareness, you brought up, what they need. And a big part of our population is the support. Many of our families feel so alone. They're often the only people they know that has a child or a teen or an adult that in their lives that has selective mutism. Even though it's not rare, it's very misunderstood. So one of the biggest things that we do is Communicamp. We do offer support groups, kind of hour-long support groups for different ages and things like that. But Communicamp for us is an all-day parent education and support. So one of the ways that we help them feel cared for is educating them, because once they have that education and understanding, it's a huge relief. And we see that change, Katie, over the course of a day. It's a 3+ day program, but we see it. The evolution of their facial expressions, their body language, their ability to connect with others. And in addition to that, the support. So support, like we offer this support through lunches. So we do a lot of that in addition to our regular. So for us, that education and support and feeling less helpless, that there is hope, and giving these people hope. So the self-care and the hope that they need to feel. And I'm sure you see this with all these different disorders that you talk about and the listeners and followers. I mean, I'm just amazed with, how many people follow you in terms of like, they value what you say. So you probably have dealt with this 1,010 times.
It's just the human condition, right? We need connection. We need other people going through it. We need to be reminded we're not alone. That's such a I don't think we talk enough about how vital that is, because feeling like an island is terrible. And then the hopelessness will creep in, and the helplessness, and so that's great that you do that. I think that's really powerful and really important. And I encourage everybody out there, if you haven't looked into things offered in your area, or even getting into Facebook groups online. A ton of my viewers find that incredible, because you can get really niche. You think you're the only person that does. You're not. Don't worry. You'll find a group.
That sense of connection and that bond that they experience. I often describe it as if you're in an airplane and, there's a lot of turbulence or something's happening and you're taught from the flight attendants in the beginning to when the oxygen mask comes down, put it on yourself first. So in order to truly help their child, the individual in their life struggling, you need to take care of yourself. And I would say the majority of people I see just don't. They are so ingrained in this process and they don't. So that oxygen mask coming on them first, giving them that oxygen to give them that fuel and needed oxygen to continue. I love that analogy, Katie.
It's a great analogy.
Hey, listeners, we'll get back to the episode in a second. I want to tell you about Communicamp, our popular 3+ day intensive group treatment and all-day parent education and support program designed to help parents, children, and teens overcome selective mutism, social anxiety, and extreme shyness. Over 3+ action-packed days, your child or teen will engage in immersive activities guided by expert clinicians that build confidence and communication skills in a supportive, fun, and collaborative environment. Spaces are limited and spots book up fast. To learn more, please find Communicamp in this episode's description or head to communicamp.org and complete our interest form, and our team will be in touch. Let's help your child or teen find their voice at Communicamp. Let's get back to the episode.
And I think there is something too, just as a reminder for anybody who has, because I hear this a lot from my audience where they're like, oh, well, if I put myself first, if I take that time, I'm taking it away from the person that I love or the person that I'm caring for. And I just want to like reframe that and let you know that if we're honest with ourselves, if we just take a minute, we know that if we don't take care of our needs, if I'm hungry, if I haven't slept well, if I haven't showered today, my ability to be patient and to be caring and to give someone the best care that I can is just not there. I'm short-tempered. I'm easily frustrated. I can't focus. All I can think about are the things that I should be taking care of for myself, right? And so instead of viewing it as like, oh, I'm taking this from them, it's like, no, I'm giving to me so that I can continue to give to them. Because if I don't take care of me, I can't continue to give. And every time your brain tries to tell you it's selfish, tries to tell you that, you shouldn't be putting this effort in, I want you to come back to that, to be like, no. I mean, the visual I've always used is like, you can't pour from an empty pitcher. So like if everybody's asking you for water, like you're going to run out. You get a couple in and you have to go refill. Think of that. How much have I poured out? Brené Brown has this great visual about like breath in versus breath out. And she's like, when you give to other people, it's a breath out. And I just love it because in my mind, it's very obvious to be like, well, if I just keep breathing out, I'll pass out, right? We have to breathe in. And so as you breathe out, make sure you're breathing in. Make sure you're doing things that feel good for you. I always tell people, if you have a tough time figuring out what feels good for you, notice what you leave doing feeling more energized than when you got there.
I was just going to say that. What energizes you? And make a list. What do you love? I mean, it could be just going to a movie or watching a Netflix show, right? Or a show on.
So simple. I love to walk through Trader Joe's on my own. I know that sounds so silly, but it's like it can be small things. It doesn't have to be like a big deal.
Yeah, I always say flip it. If you're feeling down, flip it. What would make you feel up and energized? So I think that's great information for our listeners today is I know so many of our listeners are feeling, oh my God, this is me. This is me. I feel this way. And I'm always feel guilty for taking care of myself. And I think what they have to realize is you're only going to be able to give if you give to yourself. And your time. Also, another subtlety to this is so many kids I work with, teens, even adults, are so dependent on their caregivers for everything and anything because of their inability to communicate effectively. They answer for them, they talk for them, they do for them. So as a result of that, by them giving themselves self-care and some time away is going to help independence for their child and to be able to learn and also to model them, right? To watch their mother, their father, their caregiver kind of say, hey, listen, I'm going to go for an exercise walk now. Helps me feel calm. It's amazing how our kids they all model their caregivers.
Oh, 100%. And I think the more we can model healthy coping skills, essentially. And so I think, considering that as well, it's like an added reward for taking care of yourself is that you're modeling healthy behavior for your child, or, the person in your life who you love who struggles with selective mutism. You're letting them know that when they're feeling overwhelmed, they have these things that they can do. You've modeled multiple ideas. And I think that honestly, all of us could benefit from that in our life.
No, for sure. A big thing is lack of exercise and movement, which can cause depression. I remember learning this a while back that, with our ancestors millions of years ago, whatever, that lack of movement's a depressant. And so by moving, it's not that it's an antidepressant. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be moving. And so when you don't move, you naturally will become more depressed. You just will. And so I try to, because I'm all about the whole person, right? Like exercise and just going on family walks after dinner, or Saturdays going for a small little hike in a park, having these times, joining a gym together and going. And so doing it as a family, because we do work with young children or kids with social anxiety, teens with social anxiety, adults, they don't want to do things alone. So joining a club or an activity is, maybe with a sibling or a close friend, but for the most part, getting the family to change their behaviors. And that's self-care for the parent, but you're also, as a result, teaching self-care to the child.
100%. Because it's like you said, treating the whole person, we treat the whole family because it's a family dynamic, right? Like, whether we realize it or not, I'm sure you learned this in school too, but they always talked about like the family dance and how we have like certain ways we interact with each other. And I've always loved the dance analogy because I'm like, it gives me so many funny things to play with. Like, oh, if your family's doing the Macarena, and you walk in and you're salsaing, you're going to run into them and then they're going to be agitated, right? And so we have a certain way we interact. We have a certain song we hear and a dance that we do with each other. And so we have to shift that if we want things to change, because it's not just us. We never live in a vacuum. It's how we interact with each other. And, getting group activity is great. Moving our bodies is very important. All of that is great advice.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, so many families will come to us and they want their child to talk. I just want my daughter to talk in school. I just want this. I just want them to talk, talk, talk. And they focus so much on talking without realizing that's a symptom. Their lack of communication is a symptom of something. And so when we figure out the whys of SM, for me, social communication anxiety, one of the biggest whys is sensory processing challenges. And as we know with sensory, it's difficult to regulate your emotions. And sometimes there's a hereditary component, whether it's social anxiety in the family, we see that in our research, but the sensory and feeling overwhelmed or underwhelmed or, not being able to regulate. So this self-care for them is so important, and to be so much more in tune, because they will go from 0 to 60 really quickly. So we see this kind of familial connection between this dysregulation in these individuals. So I think for some people who kind of react slower to changes, this population tends to react quicker. They go from 0 to 60 really quick. So one thing I recommend is they journal some of these feelings. Like, when do I get it? What happened right before it? So they can start to they can start to learn, oh, I was really hungry and I didn't recognize that. And I became very dysregulated or, overwhelmed. I need to care for myself. I was so tired. I didn't sleep last night. My child got up in the middle of the night and yada. I'm tired, so I need to rest. And so that self-awareness for me is just such a big part of this. And
Well, it's huge in life, self-awareness. I mean, even personally, like I love journaling, you're speaking my language. I always tell people if you're scared to start, it doesn't have to make sense. The words don't have to be spelled correctly. You don't have to be able to read it back. It's more about the process. And I even encourage people, because I do this personally, is I pose questions to myself. So if you feel like something's happening, you don't understand why, you're like, I don't know why I was like this, or I acted in this way, or why I was so agitated. Ask yourself. I know it sounds a little crazy, but you'd like, I'm always surprised at what I actually know. I just don't take the time to follow it or to consider it.
I love that you do that. That's amazing.
Yeah, journaling's been, I mean, I've been doing it off and on forever.
Well, no, the way you ask yourself questions, I just think that's great that you're actually almost as if somebody else is asking. You're such a therapist. You're you're your own
Can't help
therapist.
it. But we have all the answers, right? We do know. We just often don't either want to admit it, because sometimes it's hard to admit that, or we haven't taken the time to even consider. Because like I've even asked questions like, why was that so uncomfortable for me? Why did I feel so sad about that? Why did I give that so much value? It's been very interesting. And so if you're having a tough time and you don't really know, don't feel like you have to know to journal. You just have to seek to understand.
I love that. I love that. And when you were talking about journaling, even just drawing, right? Coloring and drawing. And, so many of the kids just love to draw. So in session, I'll have them draw a scenario, maybe what they're doing like interview questions with their friends and drawing it and visualizing it. It's amazing how that helps them. I mean, I'm huge with visuals in general for what we do. So it helps them process well, and kind of really go into themselves to think through it. And dealing with feelings is a huge part of our work. So that self-awareness. And then, you teach this to the kids, but the parents, they can benefit from this too.
Yes, because we weren't taught how to acknowledge feelings. I remember when I was writing Are You Okay? My very first book, I it was kind of like an eye opener. I was part of it, and I don't even think we kept all of it, but I was supposed to ask everybody in my like close perimeter, like my husband, a couple of my friends. I asked my mom and her boyfriend, like, what are 5 emotions that you felt today? Because it was part of the chapter was to start identifying, start understanding. When I tell you that all but 2 of the people that I asked were like, "What do you mean?" I mean, these are people I spend all my time with. I'm like, "What?" And even my husband, Sean, he was like, "So, like, good emotions, I'm like, "It doesn't matter. What are you talking about?" Just what you experience. Like, how do you feel right now? Agitated, maybe? I don't know. But we're so disconnected, right? And we don't realize it. And it's not that we have to feel every emotion like, oh, I just have to be in it. But it is helpful to acknowledge what we're going through, what's happening, what's my experience been. And so often we just don't know. That's why it's like just as important for parents as it is for their children, because like, I mean, I'll be 41 in a couple of weeks. And it's like we need to learn just as like I told you this across the board of all of my friends and my mom, like different generations we just don't always pay attention. We don't take the time. And of course, we feel dysregulated, especially. And I like that you mentioned that the parents often have their own dysregulation or sensory processing issues, because I cannot tell you the number of parents that I've seen who also have some similar issue to what their children are going through. My specialties lie in like the eating disorder space. So, talk about disordered eating parents, seen them all the time or my autistic folks. Often the parents, when the kid gets diagnosed, they're like, "Oh my God, this is me too." We just often, white knuckle it. We just try to push through. We don't know anything is different, and so it can really be beneficial for everyone to start tapping in, start paying attention. What are you experiencing? Because that gives you a place to go. I think that can kind of remove the like helpless, hopeless, or feeling frozen. It gives you a place to move to. Like, oh, I've been angry. What helps me feel better when I'm angry? Things like that.
So maybe for our listeners, as we're coming to an end to this, is, for them to take away is, I love what you said, kind of journal, take today, take tomorrow, and just go through your day and just have, your notepad on your phone open or whatever it is. And just when you're going through the day, stop a little bit and write down the emotion you're feeling and start to pay attention to that. And also, in addition to that, what do you enjoy in life? Try to list 10 things you enjoy. And it's like the littlest, tiniest thing. It could just be, making a cup of coffee and smelling it. And just because that gives somebody joy, it gives me joy. I love the smell of coffee in the morning. You do too?
Yes,
I
my favorite.
know,
It's
right?
like just a full sensory experience.
Oh, my son got me into that. And he would, when he's home, he makes his coffee every morning. And I just can't wait to smell that coffee. So that's joy for me. I all of a sudden get this feeling. And, to kind of pay attention to that and also have that list, because when you're in a mode of discombobulation, as I call it, go to that list. Go to that list and pick something you might want to do in that moment. That act of distraction to go to that alone will change how you feel.
100%. And that's great advice. I think keep the list on your phone because then you have it. We never go anywhere without our phones, unfortunately. And also, if you have trouble identifying feelings, I'm a huge fan of the feelingswheel.com. You go to feelingswheel.com. It's first of all, it's beautiful. It's like rainbow colored. But you can also just pick from it. And I think it can sometimes help because we can struggle to figure out like what is this that I experience? What do I feel? And if for any journalers out there who are like, I don't know how to get started, I always tell people start with 3 questions and just answer these simply. And you can do it every day. What is something that I'm working on? So this could be something I'm struggling with, something, I don't know, it's tough. What is something I'm looking forward to? And I think it's really important for us to always be looking forward, always have hope for the future, because sometimes it can feel like we're so stuck, right? So what am I working on? What am I looking forward to? And what am I excited about today? And it doesn't have to be, you can go in any direction with those, but I always think sometimes it's just good to start with some simple prompts, some simple questions. Where are we? How are we doing? And hopefully that can at least give you a space to kind of vent, because it gives you the space for like, what am I working on? Like what's not going so great and what's really good, or what am I excited about? And I think that kind of helps us see both sides sometimes.
I think that's fabulous, fabulous advice to kind of end this podcast with. I think that's wonderful. And I'm hoping our listeners will have written all that down, but they'll hear it and then take notes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is amazing. You have been just a wealth of information, and just, I've so love your work. Keep doing what you're doing. I love it. It's so easy to understand, which I think is not easy to do. That just shows your genius, frankly, to make something complicated easy, right?
Yeah, it is tricky trying to make something that can be complex very simple and make it make sense for everybody.
So thank you so much, Katie. I love
Of course,
this.
thank you for having me. Such a
Aw.
pleasure.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.
If you have questions on anything covered in this podcast episode, we want to answer them. Please head to selectivemutismcenter.org/ask-DRE. And we'll do our very best to answer them in upcoming podcast episodes, Smart Center newsletters, and on social media. Thank you.